So, hello everyone. Well, it's not the first time that I'm here, but it's always a pleasure to be with you. I hope you didn't come for big revelations, because I'm not going to make any. I've been asked to talk about what is happening in the first offshore tender, and also what lessons have we taken in Lithuania from abroad. So, basically, if you talk about the first offshore wind farm, it's 120 square kilometers. This is, compared to the density you would get in other countries, something which is totally comparable. In terms of distance, it's 36 to 54 kilometers from the shore. In the environmental impact assessment, they have taken into account that based on currently available size of turbine, there will be or might be a little bit of visual disturbance. We've made a lot of simulations to see how big this disturbance would be. Actually, it's not that much, but there are mostly Lithuanians in the room. I don't have to explain you how popular Palanga is in the summer. So it's not that the visual disturbance will be huge, but it's that about half of Lithuania will see it every year. So I think that's where the real problem is. It won't be a huge impact, and it is proven from many, many studies in many, many countries that in terms of environment, once the wind farms are in operation, the environmental impact is minimal. There are even studies on benefits of installed wind farms, and as in most countries, offshore wind farms are no-go zones, meaning no fishing activities, no cruising with sailboats. So if you were planning to go and visit or take a sun bath on a transition piece, that might not be allowed. So basically, if it is a no-go zone, there is a kind of a resting area for the marine biosphere, meaning that it is proven by numerous studies that there are a lot more marine life within an offshore wind farm than outside of it. So you won't have a lot of, I would say, environmental impact on that case. But there are some challenges, and they are mostly linked to the construction. So that's something we are extremely focused on. It's minimizing the environmental impact of the construction. There are different types of environmental impact. Wind farms use a lot of ships, and ships are known not to be in the current stage. It might change when the fuels will change. But in the current stage of the market, it's not the most friendly CO2 emission transportation tool. So it was part of certain criteria in the tender, and there is even a penalty if you produce too much CO2 during the construction. So that will be one of our focus, using the right ships, maybe as environmental friendly as offered by the market. On that side, the current supply chain status might not help, but we will try to achieve it. And there is a risk also linked to noise during construction. So we will try to mitigate that risk as well, using the best data, the best technologies, and all the experience from abroad. In terms of capacity, it's 700 megawatt. 700 megawatt at the net point of coupling. That means in Turbines. Because in Lithuania, the grid connection is built by the developer, but the grid connection is guaranteed. That was part of the tender. That's, based on comparison with other countries, something which was extremely important. Risk linked to availability of grid, and I think we heard the panels before saying grid availability, capability to connect project is a key factor. Here, the grid was guaranteed. Asking people to invest several billion in a country without giving them at least a point of connection, that would have been utopia. So at least the point of connection is guaranteed. Another lesson learned that was taken by the Lithuanian government is that a certain level of overplanting is allowed. What is overplanting? If you look to onshore, very often you are being judged on the gross capacity that you install. In offshore, and it's a case in a lot of countries, it's the net capacity that you produce that is being looked at. Why? You're far away, you have a substation, you're converting the voltage level, you will have losses. Especially that your network is not a global network, it's a dedicated network, there's nobody behind you. Meaning that when you're not producing, there's a very large reactive absorption of your own network. So there will be losses. So they will allow us to put effectively more than 700 megawatt, but guaranteeing that at no point we will be above 700 megawatt at the point of common coupling in Turbines. The fact that we have more than 700 megawatt means that in the medium range of generation, we will be more performing than if we had net 700 megawatt. So when the wind is not at full power, we will be generating more than a 700 megawatt wind farm. We will make usage of that overplanted capacity. That's also something which is important. If we take example on Denmark, they tolerate a far higher level of overplanting than in Lithuania. Why? We've heard a lot of people talking about trying to achieve 100% of supply with intermittent renewable. Okay? And we heard the gentleman, I think he was from 50 Hertz, saying they are at 74%, is what I remembered from the top of my head, of renewable energy in the East German grid. Let's be honest, you cannot achieve 100% of intermittent renewable on your grid if you don't have a certain quantity of offshore. Yes, the world will change. Yes, the word that utilities use, base load, might be dying, and we might go to supply contract like people from generation are talking as pay as produced, and the people on the other side, it will be pay as consumed. So you will see a change in the world of energy, but you still need to guarantee 24/7 supply of energy. Green or not green, but 24/7. And without a certain quantity of offshore, that's not doable. You can put as much solar and onshore as you wish. That won't change the fact that there is not always sun or onshore wind available. 1 megawatt hour is not 1 megawatt hour on the trading market. Ask the guys who do that. When everybody is producing, your megawatt hour is worth nothing. So offshore is the nearest to all-the-time supply as you can get in renewable energy. Then we still have those flexibility questions, but that will come later. How much is that going to generate due to that overplanting? We're talking about 3 terawatt hours of generation, taking into account most of the losses that will occur, availability, different faults that can happen on a statistical basis. That's about 25% of the usage of Lithuania based on the statistic currently. I'm not going to give an opinion on the growth of the market, but based on what we use for the moment, that's 25% of it. Number of wind turbines. The market is a bit complicated. There are people from Siemens in the room. I'll ask the question after. The world is changing fast. 2 years ago, everybody was saying 2030, 20 megawatt or bigger. That might not be the case. Look at the state of the supply chain for the moment. Some of them are having substantial financial difficulties. Some have already announced they are not going to go any further than the platform they already have. So I would say the reality, I would put it somewhere between 15 and 20, but anything beyond that doesn't seem realistic. At least for the two Lithuanian tenders, the one that just took place and the one that will take place. So that's about the number of turbines we will see. And anyway, one of the lessons learned, don't overstretch your supply chain. It is already stressed by itself. We don't need to add over it. So one of the good points here in Lithuania is that as this was a subsidy-free auction, there was not this fight between developers who is the smartest in extracting the most value and pushing the LCOE as low as possible and twisting the neck of the turbine manufacturers to get 22 megawatt turbines, or presenting a plan completely ridiculous to the government promising turbines that don't even exist. We did not have that. That's one of the advantage. People are asking me, do you really think you will build this according to the plan? If you say the plan of whom? The plan of the government around 28. Let's talk about something else. But something in this decade, that's definitely doable. But without twisting the neck of the suppliers, going into a dialogue with them on the best solution, the best price for value solution. And we have one advantage. Up to a year ago, and I'm sorry I keep using that name because he's just in front of me, when Siemens were getting an order from Vattenfall or from Ørsted, it was an order. Those guys never changed their mind. They said, I'm reserving the turbine, and 4 years later the turbine was in the water. What do we see now, especially in the UK and in the US? Those are price-driven auctions, and those guys have been awarded prices that didn't take into account the current state of the supply chain and the current stress in that supply chain. The prices and the stress of obtaining components has driven to the fact that there is a misalignment between their revenue stream, which is kind of guaranteed by the state, so there is a security of cash flow, as the gentleman was talking about, but the capex price don't match. Subsidy-free tenders have a downside, is that, I don't know if my CFO has left the room, but I hope yes, we're not going to sell the power below its price. So we will try to sell the power at the price that we will achieve. That means that if we have to pay a little bit more, the customers might have to pay a little bit more. That's the downside of a subsidy-free auction. But the upside is probably a higher security of seeing the project delivered according to the timeline. And I think that in Lithuania, for the moment, having that project in the water is maybe a higher priority than a couple of euros. Some other people might think otherwise. Height of the turbine is not that different. So where are we? I have a little news for you. Lithuania is offshore. Lithuania is starting the development of its offshore wind farm. We've awarded the Geofis contract with an option to do the geotech. Talking about qualified suppliers, I think the Vice Minister of the Netherlands might be happy because it's a Dutch company who won the contract. So it's one of the most qualified and most renowned Geofis geotech company in Europe. They took our contract and they are, and that's another advantage of being in the Baltic, they are working right now because people always talk about the danger of offshore, the difficulty, the working at sea, etc. But just like a megawatt hour is not a megawatt hour, the North Sea is not the Baltic. In the North Sea, in this period of the year, you might not want to try to do offshore activities. In the Baltic, and that's where the supply chain work starts, you can discuss about working even in the autumn or in the very early spring. Our sea is not as tough as others. We have the advantage of higher winds, but we don't have the disadvantage of those monster storms and monster waves like we can see on the other side of Denmark. So, in order to meet our challenging deadline, that's communication who wrote this, not me. In order to meet the challenging deadline, we are going as fast as we can. We got this wind farm non-pre-developed, meaning there was, of course, there's the neighbor one which has been developed, which presented a risk profile that we were maybe in a position to assume. We had some wind data which was officially published coming from the other one. We had some soil data which is officially published, but we didn't have that much. So that means if we want to keep our deadline, all those studies, environmental studies, geophysics, geotech, cable routes, grid studies. Yeah, I see that it's flashing. I'm over the time. So all those studies, we are doing them right now. We are moving extremely fast to try to get our building permit as quickly as possible, because the biggest advantage that we have is that we do not have a challenge on the grid side. So the biggest challenge is us getting the permit and the supply chain delivering us components. If we can match the two, challenging 28, but in this decade, I think I can tell you that we will try to do it. So the market conditions are moving, the prices are changing, the supply chain is in a little bit of a despair for the moment, and we hope it will modify. There's a lot of commitments being made in Brussels to sustain that supply chain, and we hope it will kick in. So we will do our best to deliver that project on time, based on the best technology available, taking into account all the lessons learned that have been brought to us from abroad. And we are not believing that we are the new world champions of offshore. So if you would come in our offices, you would encounter probably one of the most international team in Lithuania. We are recruiting a lot of people. Some of you are looking for jobs. I think in offshore we might have about 15 for the moment, but you've better be qualified. But we are recruiting as many people as we can find which are willing to come to Lithuania and which have the relevant experience, because that's another lesson learned. If you do not have the right people, you won't get that project built. So that's about it. I'm already above the time, so I won't bother you any longer. And for the people who might have questions, I'm staying around. Thank you for listening.